Hey everyone, this is Callie. Today's video is a part of the Simon Says Stamp Out of This World release blog hop. I'm excited to share this poppy field card with you. There are new stencils that accompany an older set that was released called Poppy Fields. So here's a look at that stamp set. It's large enough that you can create a 5x7 card, or you can make a standard 4 1/4 by 5.5 card. My card today is going to be 6x6. There are 4 layers to this new coordinating stencil set, and before we ink blend, I'm going to stamp my image first. And anytime there is a coordinating stamp set, I want to emboss if I don't have time to wait for that ink to dry. So I'm using a black pigment ink and spreading clear embossing powder over it, and then I'm going to heat set this image. This is going to keep my lines nice and crisp, and I'll be able to ink blend without any smudging and smearing of that black ink. I'm going to use my Stampin' Stencil mat here to hold down my cardstock. This typically will hold a stencil that's 6x6, so we'll have to use some adhesive, but at least my paper will be in place. I'm going to use some low-tack tape here to hold down my stencil over my paper, and then I'll start ink blending. For the poppies, I'm using just one color ink. This is the cherry ink from Simon Says Stamp, and what I'm doing is using a small blending brush to add just a soft blend of color over the entire flower, and then I'll use a round detail brush to add some more saturated color at the centers and on the crevices and lines of the poppies. Often flowers are illustrated with some of these lines at the top of the petals and curvatures, and that will give you a clue as to where those shadows and bends in the petals will go. So I'm just using that as a guide as to where to add that darker saturated color. And so I'm doing that at the center of my flowers as well as on the petals, going inwards towards the leaves to create that depth. I'll quickly show it again here on this last flower here. So with that small blending brush, I've added a soft layer of color, and then I'm using my small detail blending brush to add more saturated color at the edges of the curvatures of each of the petals, and as well as on the inside lower portions of each petal, as faintly as I can get it without causing any harsh lines. So you want to use a really light hand and just be patient. This is probably the bulk of the time that I spent on my card, so you just take your time with those flowers to create that depth and detail and dimension. Now moving on to the second layer, we are going to be working on the stems directly with the flowers. So I'm using some Fairway ink right now, and I'm just applying the ink darker towards the top and bottoms of these stems, and then blending it lighter towards the center. So this is a super simple layer. For the third layer, I'm going to be using the same ink, and I'm just going to concentrate on these leaves and make them a little bit more saturated towards the bottom and corners of the leaves, and then blending it lighter towards the top. That'll create a nice highlight for the tops of these leaves, especially where light would hit those leaves. So again, that's going to create lots of depth and dimension to be able to ink blend light to dark that way. And for the final layer, I'm going to be using a darker green. This is Field ink. And like that second layer, this part is going to be super simple. I'm blending from dark to light from the bottom up. Okay, as you can see, there's lots of dimension here, and it looks like I spent a lot of time coloring this, but of course stencils make it much easier than having to watercolor or use Copic markers. So I have a second panel that is cut down to 6x6, and I'll be ink blending the background to create some depth and more color for our background as well as our image. I've die cut my image with the coordinating die from the Poppy Field Stamp and Die set. So now I'm ink blending some green using Sage ink as well as some Cadet ink to add some blue splotches of color in there as well. You know, it looks like a huge mess here, but we're going to be covering the majority of that up. I just wanted a little bit of blue to pop through behind that Poppy Field image. I also added some blues and greens to my image as well, just to darken up that stark white border. And then I'm going to trim down my card panel here. I'm cutting off 1/4 inch off each of the sides to give it a nice border on a matted card base. And then I'm going to use some low profile 3D foam adhesive to attach my image to that card panel. And then I'll trim off the bottom to clean things up a little bit. Now to add some texture to my card, I've used a drop of acrylic white paint, and I've watered it down with some water, and that's going to help me get a consistency that I like for splattering, and I'll splatter my card and then let that dry while I work on my sentiment. Using a sentiment from the Power Field stamp set. I'm going to emboss in white over black cardstock. And there is a coordinating die for the word thank you, so I went ahead and did that. And then I also trimmed the so very much sub-sentiment using a trimmer. I'm adding some foam adhesive on the back of these as well. There are some black foam adhesive, so that's going to be super handy for black sentiments like this. And I'll use my handy T ruler here to help me line up my sentiment and make sure that it's nice and straight on my card. And then to finish my card, I'm using some green metal sequins here from this release, and I'm going to add a few here and there on my card. I'm using a few drops of glue where I want my sequins to go. Then I'll use my place and pierce tool to adhere my sequins in place. Now for a card base, I want my card to be 6 inches by 6 inches. To do that, I have two panels, one that's 6 by 6 and one that's 6.5. And to make a card base, I'm just going to score 1/2 inch from one of the sides, and that's going to be my tab to add adhesive to so that I can put the two together to form a card base. I'm going to use red line tape on this tab. It's a super strong adhesive, and I love to use it when I'm putting interactive boxes together or anything that I don't want to fall apart. Once I remove the backing on the red line tape, I can adhere the second panel to form a card base. That tab is going to show on the back side, but no big deal. I don't think anyone will mind, especially for a larger size card like this. So last but not least, I just need to add some adhesive to my card panel and then apply it to my card base. And that finishes my Poppy Field card for today. I hope you really enjoyed that. Thank you for hopping along with the Simon Says Stamp Out of This World blog hop. If you enjoyed any of the products that I used today, be sure to check out the links below, and there will be more details on the blog as well. Thanks so much for stopping by, and have a great day, everyone. Bye!